so they pay us some taxes.
Don't think so.
No, you just let.
I don't want to break my neck.
I know.
Afternoon. All right, good afternoon. We're going to get the meeting started. This is a committee meeting of the Committee of the Department of Public Works. My name is Councilor Green. I'm joined by Councilor Carney, Councilor Driscoll, Councilor Thompson, Councilor Bay, Councilor Lovejoy Grinnell, and Councilor Allen. So, Sam, why don't you introduce your team and then take it over.
Thank you, Councilor. I'm Sam Edelstein. I'm the city's Chief Data Officer, and next to me is Jennifer Tiff, the Deputy Commissioner of Neighborhood and Business Development.
Okay, and I'll actually kick us off if we're ready to get started. All right, so, and everyone should have a packet in front of them. We have a copy of the presentation slides for you all, as well as a few letters of support for this proposed partnership from community organizations who could not be here today. As you can deduce from the room, there are plenty of others from the community who are here today to support this effort. And then finally, a copy of the proposed memorandum of understanding is in your packet as well, so you all can have time with that over the next several days. So today we're here to talk with the council about a proposed agreement between the city, the county of Onondaga, Microsoft, and the iSchool at Syracuse University. We're really excited about this opportunity to work collaboratively with those partners because we believe it very strongly aligns with our Syracuse Surge strategy for inclusive economic growth in the new economy. So we'll talk a little bit more about how that will unfold through this partnership. And I will just also point out that we do have representatives from the other principal partners, the county, Microsoft, and Syracuse University here with us today to answer any questions that you have about how these roles in the partnership will work together, if that makes sense. So as I said, this is really an important step forward in the progress that we've already been making on Syracuse Surge. And we're really excited about the fact that we believe Microsoft's interest in working collaboratively with us as a community is evidence that there is a lot of opportunity to come from investments in technology and infrastructure and providing opportunities to people to participate in this new economy. We can move on to the next slide. I wanted to give a quick update just for the folks in this room, for the counselors, on the progress that has been made to date related to Syracuse Surge. I know everyone's been following all of these developments really closely, but we felt it was important to provide an update to this committee since I think it's been a little while since we've given an update on our Syracuse Surge efforts. So as many of you probably know, and Councilor Allen was at the first Surge Executive Committee meeting last week, which we kicked off. We're very excited about that effort. There's a very large group of leadership across, obviously, the city, the county, academia, the private sector, and our workforce development partners in the community who provide the governance of infrastructure to keep Surge going and to provide the momentum and the resources in this region and the commitments to that. And so that's what the executive committee is all about. I will just point out and say that as a part of the agenda for the next council session on Monday, there is an additional item other than this memorandum of understanding with Syracuse and Microsoft and the county for an agreement to sign a memorandum of understanding with that Surge Executive Committee. That's really just formalizing the commitment that's already been made by the city to enter into that executive committee. And this is actually a requirement of our J.P. Morgan Chase grant that the council's been pretty actively involved in supporting. And so I wanted to point that out. We're not going to necessarily spend a lot of time on that in today's committee meeting, but if folks do have questions about that MOU, I'm happy to answer them. But it is in relation to the Syracuse Surge Executive Committee. Some of the other things that have been going on in the last several months that I think are really important signs of our progress are, certainly related to the digital infrastructure that we've been implementing. So we're about 50% of the way through our installation of the smart streetlight network. Hopefully many of you have seen some of the lights around the parts of the city where those have been installed. There's a really cool website online, and we can share the link after this meeting if folks haven't seen it, that actually tracks the progress of those being installed. So you can kind of see different parts of the city almost light up on the website as we've changed over those streetlights. So that's a very exciting effort. We're making great progress, and we are on track to implement that on time, hopefully early part of 2020. The other big exciting thing that's happening is the implementation of the 5G network, which, again, the council supported a couple months ago. And so we've had about 10 permits already put through the city's permitting process. We're expecting another 50 or so by the end of this calendar year with, of course, this is with Verizon. And one, I think, great thing just to keep in mind, we've gotten some good feedback from Verizon that the permitting process has been going very smoothly from their perspective when compared to their activities in other communities around the country. So initially they had given us and all of you an estimation that it would take 5 to 6 years to implement the 5G wireless antennas citywide. They've now told us they think it can be done in about 3 years or less. So I think that's a pretty good sign that we're making some headway there with our infrastructure investments. Of course, our J.P. Morgan Chase Advancing Cities grant is underway. So as I said, we're looking forward to signing that MOU for the Surge Executive Committee, which is the next step in that process. But our partners at Center State are managing that grant and are getting ready to launch several of the programmatic elements of that grant, which really focus on workforce development and community engagement, which is exciting. Of course, our Center City Innovation Hub expansion is also moving pretty quickly. We believe in early 2020 there will be the initial work done to design and then start construction on the expansion of the Tech Garden. Of course, that's a vertical expansion, so we'll see additional floors added to that facility, which will, of course, give us additional capacity in our community to incubate some of the startups. And some of our startups are actually here today who are excited about this partnership with Microsoft. So that's another, I think, great feather in our cap. And, of course, most recently, I think, which everyone's excited about, is the recent announcement from JMA Wireless that they are about to invest $25 million in what was the Coin Laundry facility on Cortlandt Avenue and create 100 new jobs as a part of that facility. But it's a really great testament to the value of our proposition around Syracuse Surge and what this IoT-based economy can bring. That facility that they're opening up will be manufacturing 5G wireless antennas. So it's sort of proof point to our proposition that there's going to be a lot more to come in terms of jobs related to this new economy. And then finally, of course, we're all thrilled that the STEAM school legislation was passed very overwhelmingly at the state legislature this year. We're really hopeful that we'll see a governor's signature very, very soon. And we're really hopeful that in 2020 we can break ground on that project. So that's Syracuse Surge, kind of in a nutshell, hopefully a good flavor of the momentum that's being made. So that brings us to what we're here to talk about today, which is, I hope, another progress point that we can add to that slide moving forward, which is a proposed partnership with Microsoft SU and the county. One thing that's interesting that we wanted to kind of draw to everyone's attention is this book called Jumpstarting America, which I'm not sure if folks on council have had a chance to read yet. It's a relatively new book. I think it was just published a handful of months ago, so pretty current. And in it, the authors are trying to figure out what really is next in line for the economy in the country and in the world, right? What's going to be the next technology-based set of innovations that creates the jobs of tomorrow? And so they essentially did a bunch of research and uncovered that there's sort of this winning formula where government invests in technology and innovation and really does so in partnership with research institutions. So, they talk about the example of how when we were trying to win the space race, there was a huge government investment that was made and a big partnership with research institutions like MIT, for example, who created those capabilities that got us to the moon, essentially. And you can sort of see that pattern happen every time there's a major technological innovation that drives economic growth. And so they looked at, the different regions and cities, metropolitan areas around the country to say, where are those winning formulas already being seen? And they ranked them, and there's 100 or so, but the top 10 are listed on this slide here. And as you can see, we were very interested to see that Syracuse, Utica, Rome area, our region is actually third in the country in terms of places identified by this group of researchers where there is the right formula, the right attributes in place to really capitalize on emerging technology, research and development related to that to create jobs in the new economy. And some of the factors that they looked at, in addition to some of the tech factors, were really looking at the educational landscape. So where there are a lot of young people, where there's a lot of investment being made, education at the K through 12 level and beyond, obviously with good academic research institutions, and lifestyle. So cost of living plays a factor. And I think if you asked some of our friends in the audience who are from our local tech startups, they would say one of the benefits of Syracuse in this region is the low cost of living, right? So we were very, I think, encouraged to see the research that came out of this book as, again, additional evidence that we want to try to make more investments in this area to be able to capitalize on this position that we have, which really brings us to this partnership. So I'm going to turn it over to Sam, who's going to take us through some of the details of the MOU.
Thank you, Jen. So we are defining this partnership as a collaborative partnership to establish Syracuse as a regional hub for the Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, and machine learning. We're going to detail a lot of the different pieces that we have already spoken about with Microsoft and other partners here, but also want to call out that we want to come to get buy-in from the Common Council early on here. There are a lot of details that we still need to work out, and so there may be some questions that we'll answer that we're figuring it out, but we want to get buy-in from the Common Council early rather than after things have been set, and be as open and transparent as that is possible. So just quickly how we got here, so it seems like a lot longer ago, but the mayor announced this Syracuse Surge strategy in January of this year. So we're less than a year into the strategy, and since then, in mid-April, the city and the region was awarded the J.P. Morgan Chase Advancing Cities Grant. Soon afterwards, we did a meeting and an event with a number of different stakeholders throughout the city and the community to talk through exactly what does Surge mean and how do we make sure that it benefits everybody and it is inclusive. By June, we had been introduced and started having high-level meetings with executives from the county, from the university, and from Microsoft to think about this exciting strategy and where there might be some overlap and opportunities to partner. Last month, you'll recall that we brought a data sharing agreement to council to get approved, and that allowed for the city and the university to work together to get benefit from students and researchers to better understand the data that we have. And that brings us to today, where we're talking about this digital alliance between these partners and where we could help to benefit the community. So I'm going to talk through four main pillars of this partnership and where we see benefit. Just to mention again, the Surge vision states that projects and partnerships should be focused on benefiting everybody, and so that very much is what we think is here. There are some things that will benefit municipal government specifically in the way that we're able to deliver services, but a lot of things will be how do we help to support the existing programs that happen throughout the city and sort of helping to scale them. So I'll talk through each of those things now. So first, looking through economic and workforce development. When we talk about economic and workforce development with relation to this agreement, Microsoft is committing to opening a physical space in the city. This location would have Microsoft employees helping to grow and modernize existing companies throughout the city and region with supportive grants and other resources, things like training, consulting opportunities. If we think that the way that this economy is going to change is very much through the use of modernized technology, then having a partner like Microsoft on board, as well as in partnership with the other partners at the table, is really critical. So having that space is important to also then allow for additional training so that we can make sure that everybody in the city and anyone who's interested has opportunities to be trained and take advantage of what's going on. Moving to education. So from an educational perspective, if we're to be a community that embraces technology as one of the mechanisms to grow the economy, while also ensuring that everyone has an opportunity to thrive, then education is really key, and education for everybody. Again, by supporting existing programs, holding public events, and building broader partnerships, we envision that some of these opportunities for a wide range of community members, from new Americans to military families, will all be covered. I just also want to recognize that there are a number of partners in the room that we feel like all have opportunity to benefit here. I'll mention, hopefully I cover everybody, but representatives from Hack Upstate and Careers in Code, Center State and the Tech Garden, the YWCA, the Good Life Youth Foundation, Jubilee Homes, Southwest Community Centers, Syracuse City School District, SUNY EOC, folks from Onondaga County, Digital Hive, and Northland Communications are all here, and I apologize if I left anybody out. But we know that there's a lot of excitement amongst the community about where the Surge vision can go, and as there are other partners that are getting engaged and looking to help, we think that there's benefit for everybody. So moving on to the research pillar of this agreement, Microsoft is committing to support up to 4 fellowships based in the community that are focused on how we ensure that adoption of these kind of technologies is done in an inclusive and safe way. And so we have excellent research institutions in the city, from Lemoyne College to Onondaga Community College to SUNY Upstate to Syracuse University, and more. And SUNY ESF as well. The opportunities for research here are great. And to Jen's point before about the book Jumpstarting America, we know that partnership between city, academic institutions, and private sector is key to growing the economy as a whole here. And so having good partnerships built up with academia is really critical. I've talked about this a number of times, but any time that we're talking about AI, machine learning, technology generally, having a good policy and ethics around how we deploy those technologies is critical. And so in coordination with all of these partners, we'll create a policy that covers all of these things. We have a sense on what's right for the community, and certainly get feedback on what's right for the community. The universities and other colleges have a sense on where best practices are from a research point of view, and then Microsoft and other technology companies are developing the technology, and so having an understanding of where things could go and how policy syncs up with that is critical. And so we think that that's a real opportunity here for us to serve both as a way to deploy these things responsible locally, but also to serve as a model elsewhere where it matters. So that's that. And then just moving on to thought leadership. So we are excited about where the opportunities are locally here and how we can improve the city and the region internally, but we also think that we can serve as a model elsewhere. And as many cities across the country are considering how they improve their use of data and technology for improving city service delivery or other things, us being a model, I think, is a real opportunity. And so As part of that, Microsoft is going to host an innovation summit before the end of the fiscal year that will bring together national and local expertise to envision what this future could look like in the city. We then also imagine that there will be follow-on events and other kind of opportunities to understand how can we serve as a model for the future when it comes to things like artificial intelligence and machine learning and Internet of Things. So those are the main 4 pillars. I'll toss it back over to Jen to talk through some of the other details of the MOU.
Yeah, so just to cover on some of the more technical terms in the MOU. So this is a 3-year agreement that we would be signing. It does give us the option to extend that beyond if all the parties find it to be beneficial. And so that would be essentially the time frame we'd look to achieve some of those programs that Sam just talked about. This is an open and non-exclusive agreement, so we're not foregoing any other opportunities with other technology companies or other partners that may want to work with us on these things in the future. So we really don't limit ourselves by any way by engaging in this agreement. There's no direct cost for us to enter into this MOU, so we're not promising to buy any additional goods or services, certainly from Microsoft or nor are any of the other partners to the agreement. And so to the extent that we need to seek council authorization for any agreements that come out of this, we would obviously do that and keep you aware of those things as they're occurring. And then finally, we do see this as an exciting opportunity to bring additional partners to this MOU. So there are 4 principles to this agreement, but really the execution of the programs that Sam described, whether they're workforce development, educational, research, we see them as requiring the buy-in and the participation of everyone in the community, frankly. And a lot of those players are represented here today. There are other organizations that probably aren't here today who could also benefit from these things. And so we very much intend to have a pretty broad community engagement around this so that we can all work collectively together to define the vision for what this partnership should do for our community, and then work with the community organizations that already exist who are doing cool programs around digital literacy, for example, or hackathons and those types of things, to be able to leverage what's already in place in the community and hopefully just scale those and grow those so that they have a bigger impact. I think that's what we're really hoping to get out of this partnership. And I'll say that also extends, just to be explicit about it, to the universities that aren't named as partners to this MOU. So, Syracuse University has a long-standing relationship with Microsoft in a lot of ways. They brought us this opportunity to engage in this partnership. That said, there have already been conversations with all of the other academic institutions in the region, from Le Moyne to Upstate Medical, who provided a letter of support for this effort, to SUNY EOC, who's also represented here, to engage in this partnership. So the partnership does go beyond the 4 names that are sort of signatories to this MOU. And with that, I'll open it up to questions.
So starting, I guess, the MOU, obviously we just got this now, so I haven't had a chance to read it.
Yep.
And I'm sure for my colleagues too, in the coming days when we get a chance to look at it, questions will come up.
Of course.
But in a high level, I think the aspirations associated with this are positive. I think these are goals that most of us would agree with. The question is just going to be the execution of it. So I think that when you look at some of the goals here, establishing a physical location or technical training, the outcomes there range from transformational. Like, you can imagine a scenario where a physical location becomes a neighborhood hub for tech growth, or you can imagine a 400 square foot office that's open 2 hours a week and is meaningless, right? And similar with technical training. The camps, you can imagine a scenario where the outreach is done into the community and kids get new opportunities and everyone's participating, or a workshop that no one's at, right? So I think for me, the big question is going to be, what is our path forward to execute this from goal stage to specific roadmap? who are the people that are going to be overseeing that? Are we capable of doing that? And how do we ensure success on that path?
Right. Yeah, I'll just comment on that briefly because I think those are excellent points. And I'll say, we were somewhat intentional, I think, in trying to have this MOU create a fairly broad framework that does include our shared aspirations, and it does lay out some of the potential options that we have for how we can engage together. When you see the details in the MOU, you'll notice a couple of things. So one thing is with the Innovation Summit that Sam mentioned, the idea is to do that really in the next few months. And the reason why I think Microsoft has proposed that kind of a summit, which would bring together national, research and sort of some of their leading experts, as well as experts from other national organizations, along with our own community organizations, many of whom are represented here today, is to really develop that roadmap from that kind of a discussion. So we would have a 2 or 3 day meeting, and we would use the local expertise from the organizations in our own community to help advise and guide these 4 partners to say, here are the more specific goals that we would have for this. Here's, our ideals for engaging the community. The other thing that is also noted in the MOU, which again I think would flow out of that initial summit, is the development of metrics. So these 4 partners are, I think, agreeing to developing a set of metrics, and I think we're happy to engage the council on this further, where we can identify really specific and impactful targets for what we're trying to get out of this agreement. So while the agreement is itself, a bit higher level, and it's really more of a menu of options potentially.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. Could you share what you think some of those targets are? Like, it would be great to have like a clear. I mean, I know we've heard the broad strokes, but if you were to say just now, like, what are some of the tangible targets?
Yeah, so I mean, for example,
in what
I think
categories,
setting a target number of, for example, students to go through some of the educational programs, or the number of participants in some of the workforce development programs, for example, that would be, in addition to what they would all, normally otherwise serve as it relates to these opportunities. It could be the types of hardware and software that Microsoft can provide to some of our startup communities, to existing businesses, which is a part of this MOU, those types of things. So I think in those 4 categories that we laid out, whether it's workforce development, educational, research, because there will certainly be research targets in terms of how many projects actually go on in the city, to explore these different technologies and their uses. I think we want to establish a real specific goal around the digital ethics policy that Sam talked about. So that's maybe, a milestone type goal, like by the end of the next calendar year, we want to have a draft policy in place. So those are the types of more specific things that I think we do need to spell out, and that would be part of the next step. But we didn't want to necessarily come to the council with a pre-baked, fully developed plan, because we intend to engage you early on in this process and make you a part of that journey, if that makes sense.
I have a question. So if we do, with the idea of the smart city hub somewhere, there has to be a physical location somewhere, right? So in this case, who would have ownership of the physical property, being that there's so many entities involved in this, and a lot of them are nonprofit and are tax exempt. So who would actually own the physical building?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we're currently exploring, I think, a number of different options for that. And our idea really goes back to this idea of creating a New York Center for Smart Cities here, which was a part of the Surge strategy when it was announced. The idea has always been for this to very much be a public-private partnership. So, we're really looking to develop something that exists in the community that has, I think to the point you're making, Councilor Allen, private sector investment that, ideally creates a tax basis for us, but that also houses critical functions in government. One of the ideas is that we create a digital command center for government that starts to really track and manage and understand the data flowing from some of these investments, like the streetlight network, for example. And as we start to implement other things, there will be even more, more and more data at our fingertips. And so we want to engage in smart, efficient, constituent responsive government. And I think that kind of gets housed there too, as well as hopefully some incubation space that continues to add to the resources in the community for the development of businesses. And I think that is the area that Microsoft would really like to lean in on. And so, we haven't worked out, again, all the details in terms of how much square foot and how many resources and what that will look like, but you can start to imagine some possibilities around available, software, hardware for people to actually come and touch and play with and experiment with. And so I think that's essentially our vision. Like I said, we're still working out all of the details in terms of what that could look like and how it gets developed. And we're having conversations with our partners at the state right now about, how we could potentially go to the state to ask for some support to actually get that facility built.
Okay.
So more on that to come.
One thing, I know you mentioned workforce development, but one thing I do want to make sure that we do correctly is have this as a true workforce development project and kind of be deliberate and focus on the unemployed population instead of us just moving one working person to another job.
Right.
We know that our unemployment rate is kind of high, and this is a great opportunity for us to reduce that if we can. So I would definitely like that to be a focus point.
Yes, that's our intent. So duly noted.
Yeah, I just want to follow up on Councilor Allen's initial question, which is, so is this seen as the physical location, is this like an anchor tenant in the larger smart cities project, or is this seen as are these two separate things?
That's a good question, and to be honest, we're debating both possibilities. I could argue that both maybe make sense. So, as I said, I think we're in the process of putting together a couple of different options and proposals around the physical location. And so once we have more detail on that, we'll certainly be coming back to talk to you all about it. But that's really the kind of the crux of what we're currently studying with this. But I think this gives us tremendous opportunity in either of those scenarios.
Because I guess, and this may be in here, but what's the timeline for when they're trying to be here? Because obviously if you're building it into
Right.
a larger project, that's not
Right.
happening this year. So.
Yeah, so I mean, our expectation on that point is that, there are established resources here and a physical presence in the very near future. So in months, not years. And so that may mean that there's a temporary location. That might mean that we explore options with the Tech Garden or with other established facilities. And so we've started having some of those conversations too, even though there might be a longer term vision for something that may take a bit more to develop. I mean, we would certainly like to use this as an opportunity to continue the redevelopment that's going on in that area around, sort of where JMA announced its investment in the former coin facility. So that's certainly our initial target and our hope. So.
Can I get a few, Councilor? So one thing I'd just like to state off the jump, and not to be critical of SU, which is our biggest employer and a great partner, but the ratio of students who are actually from Central New York that stay in Central New York at Lemoyne and OCC, I think is the exact opposite ratio to SU. I believe it's 25% that are actually from and stay in the region at SU, whereas it's 75% at Lemoyne and OCC. So not to say at the expense of Syracuse's involvement, but I want to make sure that OCC and Lemoyne are certainly included in the conversation all along the way, because to Councilor Allen's point about making sure we're targeting people that are from the region that have, that have challenges in the workplace. We could use all the jobs we could get going to local people who are from here, who live here. Not that attracting people who might have moved on that went to SU isn't a great feature as well, but I'd like to see some equity in that to make sure that we're reaching out to Lemoyne SU. And I guess, this all sounds, again, the memorandum of understanding, you guys are still working on the details. This is just basically a firing shot to initiate that we're going to start the conversation and start moving forward along this path. But two things that concern me about the digital economy, as we spoke in private, I just want to say it on the public record as well, that when you're not the customer, you're the product. So I'd be curious about data collection. Is there any data collection? I'd like to say up front that as we begin this conversation, it would be good to make it clear that any data that's collected on behalf of the municipality is the municipality's property, and that it would not be exploited for financial gain or any other purposes without the consent of the council and the administration, because currently data is, we all know, a very precious and highly valued resource. And so just in the interest of my constituents, I know in posting this already, there was comments on Facebook about, and some of that is tinfoil hat, but some of that is, for those who have been following what's going on in the digital economy, I think it's also a realistic fear that it's good to define those terms before getting too deep into the agreement. And the other one, I think, is, something like Facebook, where the product is free for so long, and then it turns out you need it in order to live. So with Microsoft providing infrastructure that we're going to be relying on, what does that look like 5-10 years down the road if the city's operations are completely reliant on that, and then all of a sudden the pay structure comes in, because that's the digital economy. Use it for free. Actually, it's going to be, X amount per year to keep this going. So I worry about those two things that are kind of slow rolls of the digital economy, but not to say that makes me, I think this is a super exciting project. I know we have a lot of great partners in the room. The list of partners that you listed that are in the room are all, great people that we know from the community who are doing great work out there, and they're the exact kind of partners that we want to see at the table working on a project collaboratively. So not to throw cold water on it, but I think those two things around digital economy and the digital ethics thing, as Sam and I talked about, I know it's a concern of yours as well. I just worry about clarifying that up front rather than figuring out in 5 to 10 years when we're already interwoven into the process, where figuring out what the deal is going to be with data up front, and if we start utilizing, but none of that is really what's being discussed at the moment. I understand that you guys are talking about a space and blah blah blah, but as we go down this road, that's the red flag that raises for me. So I just want to put it out there in the conversation on the record that digital ethics should be something that's at the forefront of this conversation as we go along. And I know it's included in your presentation. So
yeah, I think on the record, we are fully committed to all the things that you mentioned. This specific agreement does not talk about data sharing at all, but obviously that is something that we have discussed and will continue to be a discussion. Data that the city collects is actually, it's the people's data.
Yeah.
And so, and I think that we follow through on that in our values as a city and being transparent and accountable through the open data portal that we have. We post much data as long as it's not private in nature. We try and make it public. And that will continue to be how it goes. I think the other important thing, again, this agreement isn't talking about data sharing, but it's important for us to not have exclusive agreements on these things, because as things go forward, we don't want to be stuck in specific lanes. And so we hear you and agree.
that makes sense. Thank you.
One thing I do think is worth mentioning, you touched on the SU, Lemoyne, and OCC, and a part of the Surge Executive Committee, Lemoyne is involved. So I believe they have 2 people on the committee as well, right? And I'm not sure about OCC. Yeah. Yep.
Great.
So they are involved.
Good. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you.
So my questions are kind of how to explain this and how to understand this from the perspective of a person who's not involved in the vision boarding that you folks are doing, how do we explain this as not merely a plan to make a plan, which, what part of what you said is none of the on-the-ground things necessarily are going to happen until that innovation summit happens. I think if I'm hearing you right, that's when the metrics will be developed. That's when the step 1, step 2, step 3 would be developed. So we're talking about sometime between now and June of 2020, where what are people going to see? How are people going to be aware of this? In what way will their lives be affected? And then if you can give us an idea of what step 1, step 2, step 3 might be from folks who've been working on this. Obviously, the surge was announced in January. This is maybe one step of that, but like, what are people going to experience?
So we have representatives from Microsoft here as well. Does it make sense to talk a little bit about experience in a couple of the other cities where this has happened? This is Jason Melton from Microsoft who's here.
Hi. Thank you, first of all, for having me here today. As Microsoft has done a few of these other engagements at the regional level in the last 6 to 12 months, leading up to this, many of these engagements were done at the statewide level, and what we started to recognize is that ultimately these resources weren't having the impact that everybody involved in the conversation was hoping they would have. But what we've started to experience and recognize is that when we do the partnerships at a regional level, the things seem to have to make it to where they're supposed to make, and working with community partners to accelerate, support, and help them grow the efforts that they're trying to have in the community. So from a time frame perspective, many of the items in there are not bound by any particular time frame, right? So yes, the Innovation Summit is important. I was just talking with my new friend Twiggy here, and she said they recently did a hackathon here in the community. I said, how was it? She said it was fantastic and successful. We just want to make sure we're able to do more of those. So anything listed in this document, if there are partners in the community that are working on these kinds of things, what we're providing is simply an opportunity or a service to the community. And if there are folks in the community that want to coordinate and consume and grow the offerings they're having, they can do that when they're ready. The Innovation Summit is it'll be a nice big deal. We'll bring a lot of thought leaders in and have a very fruitful conversation. But step 1 is, with your support and everybody's in agreement that we're going to move forward together, is saying, here's how we're going to move forward together. Here are the opportunities and offerings that we want to be supportive of in your community. And from there, it's just coordinating how you'd like to consume them.
So does that mean that the onus would be on our partners to then reach out either through our city personnel or directly to say, we want to do digital camps, we want to do a hackathon, how can you support us, train us, provide resources for us? Or are you saying that these are programs that are going to be initiated by the city or initiated by Microsoft?
Probably a little bit of all of the above. Ideally, we'd like a coordinated effort, right? So that the partners in the community that want to leverage these resources know what's available and how. And then there will be a point of contact at Microsoft that will coordinate those resources and make sure they're where they need to be when they're needed.
Yeah, and I'll just chime in to say, so, one of the roles that the city plays in this arrangement, and in partnership with the county, obviously, from that regional perspective, is to play a convening role. So, we're essentially identifying, as we have leading up to today's conversation, and will continue to now after today's conversation, all of the different organizations and groups within the community that already have some of these programs in place that could benefit from being able to scale them further, as Twiggy said, to do more of these kinds of things, as well as potential partners who maybe haven't engaged in some of this tech education or digital literacy that might want to start programs. So we're going to try to develop an inventory, essentially, of organizations that already have access to target, parts of our community. I know a comment was made earlier, I think by Councillor Allen, about really making sure this is true to the Surge's vision of incorporating or including parts of our community that have traditionally been left out of these discussions, and the underemployed and the marginalized populations that actually, really do need jobs and we hope can get some skills to get some of these jobs that are emerging. And so when you have announcements, for example, like the JMA announcement a few weeks ago, where as a part of that, they basically said they're very open to recruiting from the community that immediately surrounds that site on Cortlandt Avenue. This kind of a program in partnership with Microsoft and the university and the county could actually help provide additional skills and resources to that immediate surrounding community that JMA can then hire from to meet its requirements. So, I think the way that we're going to go about engaging is, through a lot of the ways that we already engage the community, working hand in hand with community organizations that already have active engagement opportunities, that already have all of their lists and their active members of their community that we can tap into to get the word out that these opportunities exist. And a big benefit that I think we have as well around engagement that hopefully people will start to really see and hear more of is through the J.P. Morgan Chase grant. You'll recall a big aspect of that grant is to fund community engagement so that we can identify members of the community that can benefit from these kinds of programs, that need more workforce development support, those types of things. So we're very intentionally coordinating this new partnership, for example, with our ongoing commitment to J.P. Morgan Chase, so that we don't duplicate effort and we don't, we don't act redundantly, right? But that we can hopefully amplify each other's work. And so there will be some additional resources that we have at our disposal through the J.P. Morgan Chase grant to do additional community outreach, engagement, which I think is really about identifying the potential participants in all of these programs and getting them connected and plugged in, as well as identifying partner organizations that can actually help deliver the programs. So we'd like to obviously be able to do that and leverage that so we're not recreating the wheel, if that makes sense.
Can I grab one? Still going on?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I just want to push a little bit on that. Like, we've heard about engagement and cooperation and collaboration and nurturing and all those things, but like, what will people see between now and when the Innovation Summit happens that will be able, I understand you're going to be doing all these things behind the scenes, but what will people be able to see between now and June of 2020?
Yeah, so, without having planned all of those specifics, I think there will be opportunities for direct engagement. So if that's, if you're already, an active participant in the Southwest Community Center, for example, or Syracuse Connected Communities now, right? Like, you will hopefully hear through their channel and their network, there's going to be an opportunity to participate in a hackathon. There's going to be an opportunity to sign up for a workforce development program. Do you want to sign up? So we're trying to leverage the networks that already exist. So it's probably not going to, come from Sam Edelstein at syrgov.net, some invitation. It's already public, my friend. That said, I'll give my email address too if it makes you feel any better. jtift@syrgov.net. But it will likely come from the networks that already exist and established in the community. So we're really hoping to activate the community in that way, so that we can start to really reach people, in their community centers, in their, organizations where they do after-school programs, all of those types of things. And we're, frankly, really open to having those conversations and starting with this process and talking to folks that are here today to say, how can we best leverage your resources? How can we help you to do that outreach? So, we'll provide, obviously, the details about when and where to show up, but we're really hoping to tap into folks in that way, I guess. So I would hope people can expect to start to see that, utilizing the school district, for example. So that's another good avenue, I think. And then, of course, our university partners for the research components of this to get people signed up to engage in that activity.
So I guess the last question I would have then is, what difference would it make if there's no cost to the city for this MOU? What difference would it make if this MOU was not approved? How would that change? What would happen next? Because there's nothing in the MOU from my very brief review that says city must do this, or Microsoft must do this, or a community partner must do this. So we all have these shared aspirations, what happens, how does the MOU move us forward? And how would not approving the MOU not move us forward?
So, I mean, from my perspective, you could look at this and say this is purely symbolic. I think, though, there is something to be said for having 4 partners who, to your point, would probably like to work together regardless, sign on the dotted line and say they're committed in principle to achieving certain goals. And at the end of the day, you know, if there is this agreement, I think it does give us a mechanism to hold each other accountable to a shared vision and a shared set of goals, even though, you know, maybe to your point, like legally we're not really obligated to do anything, or Microsoft is not legally bound to do anything. But it means something to sign a agreement, even if it's just in principle, from my perspective.
So you said that it was, you mentioned no cost, right?
Well, that's what their PowerPoint says, is no direct cost.
Right, but on the first page, so under terms and conditions, under D, expenses, it says parties agree that each shall pay its own fees, costs, and expenses. So what would that entail?
Right, so, you know, I mean, I think, for example, like in the Innovation Summit context, right, like we'll probably invite various, you know, parties to participate in that. So to the extent that we're, you know, typing up an invitation and sending it out from, you know, one of our email addresses, for example, like that's obviously our staff time. We're doing that. Same thing from a Microsoft perspective or a county perspective. Those kinds of promotional activities are things that we're undertaking in the name of this agreement. So those are things that we're all, you know, individually agreeing to support and to do. That's just one very tactical example. You know, certainly there will be planning meetings and things of that nature. I mean, we're obviously going to have staff available to attend those, so that there's time involved, but we're not committing to, you know, basically, you know, any kind of a contractual obligation to buy goods or services. That's really what the no direct cost point is about. But yeah, certainly the expectation would be that we're allocating some time and staff resources. You know, each of the 4 partners is agreeing to do that to make this meaningful.
On the city side of it, where are you guys pulling the staff from? Just from the innovation office or from other departments?
Well, so, you know, myself from business development, I think, is going to continue to be pretty actively involved. The innovation team, obviously, will continue to be engaged. I think the mayor's staff is pretty engaged and will provide leadership on this. But this, you know, we don't expect this to take away from the, you know, the day jobs of the folks who are out on the streets and kind of boots on the ground to provide services to the people.
Okay.
Can I hop in? Is that okay? You done, Councilor Allen?
Yep.
Okay. And Councilor Lovejoy, I thought that was a great question with the MOU. It's a good question. What's the gentleman's name from Microsoft again? Can I ask you a few questions? You can hop up to the mic. If that's all right. So I guess my first question would be, so the city's not buying anything from Microsoft, no money's exchanging hands between us as of now.
Correct.
What does Microsoft get? How does this benefit Microsoft? How do you hope it will benefit Microsoft in the future? Why are you guys at the table? How does this help you?
Yeah, those are good questions. So you're right, there's no exchange of any resources or money now. Mm-hmm. The benefit is that we are engaging in these kinds of MOUs and engagements all across the country, and these conversations are happening more and more frequently. We have certainly recognized that there is something particularly unique happening here in Syracuse. A lot of the winds seem to be blowing in the same direction. You have a clear regional plan that you want to achieve. It aligns very well to Microsoft's strategy of empowering everybody to achieve more. And so we believe that we are in alignment with your vision. It's something that we have committed to publicly, that this is the kind of change we want to see and be in the world. I believe that long term, we want to be a part of these kinds of partnerships and these kinds of opportunities to have that impact in the world. If it results in, a mutually beneficial business relationship where everybody is winning, I think everybody is probably fine with that. But for now,
could you tuck into what that might look like?
I can't. It would be incredibly difficult to forecast or predict what any of that may look like. The purpose of this MOU here is to really initiate that conversation in a very similar way that we've entered into these conversations in other regions, as a list of, a way that, because we believe in the value of what you're trying to do, why we want to be a part of it and what we can offer to help ignite that spark or accelerate it or help you achieve your vision. Did that answer the questions?
Somewhat. I mean, I know we all have altruistic dreams, but there's got to be something in it for you guys as a company as well, no? I mean, there's got to be some financial gain somewhere down the road, educating a workforce.
All of those things
that benefits you guys. I mean, there's got to be something that's beyond we all love the vision, but, there's got to be some financial gain for you guys somewhere down the road, right?
I know very few businesses that do anything without some downstream vision to shareholder value. But at this stage, we're investing and asking for nothing in return. It is not binding. You guys can review it and say we don't want to be a part of it anymore.
It's not binding, so I feel good about it. I don't know.
Yeah, forgive our skepticism, but
just always makes me feel weird when one of the biggest companies in the world comes up and says we foresee no profits in a 20, 30-year interim, which is, if that might be the case. I'm not, in no point have I been like, this MOU has secret clause in it, but I'm just,
I understand your skepticism.
I wouldn't say necessarily skepticism, but even you said, Barnes & Noble sets up a coffee shop they don't do it because they want to educate people and get the books out there. They do it because they're going to sell the books. And
I don't think it has to be mutually exclusive, but I totally understand your point.
Yeah, but I think there's got to be some hope of, I'm not even saying immediate, but
sure,
down the road in 20 years. I could see the benefit of training up a workforce here in Syracuse. Workforce training is the number one thing that companies look for. So if perhaps that's the long-term goal, I just want to kick the tires on that there must be something in it for Microsoft as altruistic. And Bill Gates puts a couple $100 million a year into altruistic dreaming ideas, and maybe that's just what you're doing here, but you're doing it in a lot of cities, so I'm assuming there's, I don't know.
Maybe could you tell us more about the cities where we're a little farther down the line on this, and what measurable impacts you've had?
Yeah, so I'm not intimately aware of what is happening in those other two cities. I know from a high-level framework, and they're still very new. In the last 12 months that these initiatives have kicked off. Houston, Texas is one, and Louisville, Kentucky is the other. Very similar agreements, but each of these is going to be entirely different based on what the vision the region wants to be known for and achieve, but very similar in theory. They want to develop skills in the region. They want to attract opportunity, innovation, all of those kinds of things to their region. And at this phase, Microsoft wants to be a part of that, as altruistic as it may be at this phase. But sure, I don't know the KPIs on what measurable impact they've had. Right now it's a bit of an experiment.
When did they start again? Sorry, Houston and Louisville?
Louisville, I believe, was 6 or so months ago, and I think Houston may have been this year. It's not that long ago. So they're all very similar in nature, that they are AI, data-driven,
building physical locations and hubs.
So those details they're still working through, very similar to the conversation we had here of what it could become. There are conversations about co-sharing space and those kinds of things. This really is a first step in agreement to continue the conversation to see what this could become. And we do like to show up with, here's how we can support you out of the gate.
Anything, Councilor Carney? You've been rather quiet.
Very unusual for me. No, I mean, I get it. It's you look at whether you're going to say it or not. It's look at they're coming to invest in us and working with us because at the end of the day, I think there's a hope that when future things come up in advance and there's possibilities for better partnerships on different things,
Yeah.
that we're going to dance with the one that brung us.
Yep. Which is legit. Yep.
Which, yeah. So look at this is a good thing.
Yeah.
This is it. Look at a lot of this is a little above my pay grade because I struggle turning on a computer, but I like it.
I could send you one of these classes.
I was going to say, we could join one of the camps. We can.
I'm excited about it.
That's right.
That's
We'll get you
Counselor
into a
Carney.
class.
You're going to teach me about Microsoft Word?
It's Councilor Carney signing up for a digital literacy classes.
Okay.
Happened
Be
here,
the first
folks.
one.
You got the scoop.
All right. I've noted that down. We're going to get you
There you
signed
go.
up.
Councilors, additional?
Anything else, Councilor Thompson?
Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks to all our partners as well for coming out. I see Center State and Jubilee and Digital Hive. Thanks everyone for coming and being a part of this.